The man who had everything Jackson Reed stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office on the 35th floor, watching the Seattle skyline glitter in the late afternoon sun. At 42, he'd built Red Enterprises from a small software startup into a technology powerhouse worth $3 billion. His tailored navy suit fit perfectly, his dark hair showed just the right amount of silver at the temples, and his reflection in the glass showed a man who appeared to have conquered the world. But appearances could be deceiving. Today was supposed to be his biggest triumph yet. In less than an hour, he would sign a merger agreement with Hoffman Tech Solutions that would make Reed Enterprises the dominant player in cloud computing across the entire West Coast. Bradley Hoffman, his business partner and CFO, had spent 6 months negotiating the deal. The lawyers had reviewed every clause. The board had unanimously approved. Everything was perfect. Jackson turned from the window as his assistant knocked on the door. Behind her, Bradley entered with his characteristic confident stride, carrying a leather folder that contained the contract. 2 other executives followed, along with 3 lawyers. "Ready to make history, Jackson?" Bradley asked, flashing his trademark smile. His blonde hair was perfectly styled. His expensive watch caught the light as he placed the folder on Jackson's mahogany desk. "Let's do this," Jackson replied, though something in his gut felt unsettled. He had learned over the years to trust his instincts, but he also knew that big decisions always came with anxiety. He pushed the feeling aside. The team arranged themselves around the desk. One lawyer opened the folder and turned to the signature page, placing an elegant fountain pen beside it. Jackson reached for the pen, feeling the weight of the moment. This signature would change everything. His company would double in size. His net worth would skyrocket. His name would be in every business magazine in the country. The quiet voice, the office door opened so quietly that at first, no one noticed. Nina Torres entered with her cleaning cart, her head down, her movements practiced and invisible. She wore the standard Navy custodial uniform, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She was part of the scenery, as unremarkable to these executives as the furniture. Nina had worked the evening shift at Reed Enterprises for exactly 4 months. She cleaned floors, emptied trash bins, and wiped down surfaces while the important people made their important decisions. No one ever looked at her twice. No one ever asked her name. She was simply the cleaner. And that was exactly how she needed it to be. But tonight was different. As Nina pushed her cart toward the far corner of the office, she glanced at the papers spread across Jackson's desk. Her heart stopped. Even from 10 feet away, she recognized the format, the layout, the specific legal phrasing in the header. She had seen it before, years ago, in another office, in another life. The memory hit her like a physical blow. Jackson lifted the pen. His hand moved toward the signature line. Nina's feet moved before her brain could stop them. She crossed the office in 4 quick steps, her cart forgotten. She leaned close to Jackson's shoulder, and in a voice barely above a whisper, said 3 words that would change both their lives. "Do not sign." The moment everything changed, Jackson's hand froze. The pen hovered over the paper, ink nearly touching the page. Around him, the executives and lawyers exchanged confused glances. Bradley's smile faltered. Jackson turned his head slowly and found himself looking into a pair of intense brown eyes. The woman standing beside him, this custodian he had never truly noticed before, was staring at him with an urgency that made his breath catch. There was intelligence in those eyes, and fear, and something else he could not quite name. "Excuse me?" Bradley's voice cut through the moment, sharp and irritated. "Jackson, what is she doing?" Nina stepped back immediately, her face flushing. She had broken every rule she had set for herself. She had spoken up. She had interfered. She had made herself visible, but she could not stay silent. Not again. Not when she knew what that signature would cost. "I apologize," Nina said quickly, keeping her eyes down. "I should not have interrupted. Please excuse me." She turned toward her cart, but Jackson's voice stopped her. "Wait." Everyone in the room stared at him. Jackson set down the pen and stood, his full attention now on the woman who had just whispered those 3 words. Something in her voice, in her eyes, had reached through all his carefully constructed walls and touched something true. "What did you say?" Jackson asked quietly. Nina's hands trembled. "Nothing, sir. I was out of line. You told me not to sign." Jackson took a step closer. "Why would you say that?" The room erupted in protests. Bradley moved forward, his face reddening. "Jackson, this is ridiculous. We do not take business advice from the cleaning staff. Security should escort her out immediately." "Everyone be quiet," Jackson said, his voice carrying the authority that had built an empire. The room fell silent. He looked at Nina again. "I am asking you a question. Why should I not sign this contract?" Nina's mind raced. She could walk away right now. Apologize again, return to her cart, finish her shift, and disappear into the night. She could protect herself, stay invisible, stay safe. But when she looked at Jackson Reed's face, at the openness in his expression, at the genuine question in his eyes, she thought of her father. She thought of another man in another office who had signed papers he should not have signed. She thought of everything that came after. "Because I have seen this exact contract structure before," Nina said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "And the man who signed it lost everything." The decision, Bradley laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "This is insane. Jackson, sign the papers. We have a schedule to keep, and we are not going to let some conspiracy theory from a janitor derail 6 months of work." But Jackson was not laughing. He was studying Nina's face, reading the truth written in every line. His instincts, the ones he had pushed aside moments ago, were now screaming. "Everyone out," Jackson said. "What?" Bradley's face went pale. "Said everyone out. The meeting is over. We will reconvene tomorrow." "Cannot be serious," one of the lawyers protested. "The other party is expecting signed documents tonight. If we delay, we could lose the entire deal." Jackson picked up the folder and closed it. "Then we lose the deal. Get out. All of you." Bradley stared at him like he had lost his mind. "You are making the biggest mistake of your career," Jackson replied. "But I would rather make a mistake by being cautious than by being foolish. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., we will review everything again. Until then, this contract stays unsigned." The room cleared slowly, executives and lawyers filing out with confused and angry expressions. Bradley was the last to leave, pausing at the door to give Nina a look of pure hatred before slamming it behind him. Silence filled the office. Jackson and Nina stood alone, the unsigned contract between them. Outside, the Seattle skyline had shifted from gold to purple as the sun set behind the mountains. "Thank you," Jackson said finally. "That took courage." Nina's shoulders sagged with relief and exhaustion. "I hope I did the right thing. So do I." Jackson gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit down. I think you need to tell me a story about a contract and a man who lost everything. And I need to know why you are working as a custodian when you clearly know more about corporate law than my entire legal team." Nina looked at the chair, at this powerful man who had just risked millions because of 3 whispered words from a stranger. Slowly, she sat down and began to tell him about her father, about a similar contract, and about the day her whole world fell apart. Neither of them knew it yet, but that conversation would be the beginning of everything. The story she carried. Nina sat in the leather chair across from Jackson's desk, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The office felt enormous now that they were alone, the silence broken only by the faint hum of the city below. She had spent 4 months invisible in this building, and now she was about to expose everything she had worked so hard to hide. "My father was David Torres," she began, her voice quiet but steady. "He was a corporate attorney in San Francisco. Not famous, not wealthy, but respected. He built a small practice representing mid-sized companies in contract negotiations and mergers. He was good at what he did, honest, thorough. People trusted him." Jackson leaned forward, listening intently. He had pulled up a chair so they sat at eye level rather than across the imposing desk. It was a small gesture, but Nina noticed. 15 years ago, a client came to him with an opportunity, a merger with a larger firm that would expand their operations significantly. The contract looked perfect on the surface. My father reviewed it 3 times. He had 2 other attorneys look at it. Everyone agreed it was solid. Nina's voice caught, and she paused to steady herself. "What happened?" Jackson asked gently. Hidden in subsection 12, paragraph 8, clause D, there was language that seemed standard. Routine profit-sharing terms. But the wording was crafted so carefully that it actually transferred controlling interest to the other party after 18 months. By the time anyone realized what had happened, my father's client had lost everything. The business, the assets, even the intellectual property they had spent decades building. And your father? He was blamed for missing it. His reputation was destroyed overnight. Other clients left. New clients would not touch him. The California bar investigated him for malpractice, and even though they found no wrongdoing, the damage was done. Within 2 years, his practice was gone. We lost our house. My mother had to move in with her sister in Portland. My younger brother dropped out of college. Nina's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she continued, "My father fell into depression. He kept saying he should have seen it, that he had failed everyone who trusted him. I was in law school at the time, studying to follow in his footsteps. I had to drop out to work and help support the family." "Nina, I am so sorry," Jackson said, and she could hear the genuine compassion in his voice. "He died 5 years ago. Heart attack. The doctors said it was from stress, from carrying the weight of that failure for so long." Nina finally looked directly at Jackson. But it was not really a heart attack that killed him. It was shame. It was the feeling that he had let everyone down, that he was not smart enough, not careful enough. The contract killed him, Mr. Reed, just as surely as if someone had put a gun to his head. The investigation begins. Jackson stood and walked to his desk, picking up the contract folder. He opened it carefully, flipping through pages until he found section 12. His eyes scanned the dense legal text, and then he saw it. Paragraph 8, clause D. The language was technical, almost impenetrable. But now that he knew what to look for, the trap was obvious. "How did you spot this?" he asked, turning back to Nina. "After my father died, I became obsessed with understanding what happened. I spent years studying that original contract, breaking down every word, every phrase. I learned to recognize the patterns, the specific ways these traps are hidden. The formatting, the legal terminology, even the font choices. I can spot them now almost instantly." Jackson felt a chill run down his spine. "You saw this from across the room?" The header format was identical. Same law firm that drafted my father's contract, same senior partner signature. I knew before I even read a word that something was wrong. Jackson sat back down heavily. His mind was racing. 6 months of negotiations. Dozens of lawyers reviewing the documents, his entire board approving the deal, and a custodian had spotted in seconds what they all had missed. "I need to make some calls," Jackson said, reaching for his phone. Over the next 3 hours, Jackson assembled a team. Not his regular lawyers, but specialists he flew in from New York and Boston. Experts in corporate fraud and contract law, he had them review every page, every clause, every word. Nina sat with them, pointing out the subtle warning signs she had learned to recognize. At 11 p.m., the lead specialist looked up from the conference table, her face pale. "Mr. Reed, if you had signed this contract, within 2 years you would have lost operational control of Reed Enterprises. Your partner, Bradley Hoffman, would have had the legal right to force you out of your own company. You would have retained a minority stake, but all decision-making power would have transferred to him and his investors." The room fell silent. Jackson felt as though the floor had dropped out from beneath him. Bradley, his partner for 8 years. His friend, the man he had trusted with everything. "Are you certain?" Jackson asked, though he already knew the answer. "Absolutely certain. This is one of the most sophisticated corporate takeover schemes I have seen in 20 years of practice. Whoever designed this knew exactly what they were doing." The connection deepens after the lawyers left. Jackson and Nina remained in the conference room. Dawn was breaking over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Neither of them had slept. "You saved my life," Jackson said quietly. My company, yes, but more than that. You saved me from becoming your father, from carrying that weight." Nina nodded, too exhausted for words. "Why did you risk it?" Jackson asked. "You could have stayed silent, kept your job, stayed invisible. Why speak up for a stranger?" Nina looked at him, really looked at him, saw past the expensive suit and the powerful position to the human being underneath. "Because I could not watch it happen again. I could not stand by and let another person suffer the way my father did, even if it cost me everything." "It will not cost you anything," Jackson said firmly. "I promise you that." But he was wrong. Over the next few days, as word spread through the building that Jackson had called off the merger based on advice from a custodian, the backlash was swift and brutal. The price of truth, the executive team was in chaos. Bradley, realizing his scheme had been exposed, had disappeared, but his allies remained. They whispered in corners, spread rumors, questioned Jackson's judgment and sanity. "He is taking business advice from the cleaning lady," one board member said loudly in the cafeteria, making sure Nina could hear. "He has lost his mind." Nina felt the stares everywhere she went. In hallways, elevators, break rooms, people who had never noticed her before now watched her with suspicion and resentment. Some whispered that she was a con artist, that she had manipulated Jackson for money. Others suggested she had seduced him. Their relationship was inappropriate. The worst came from Patricia Jennings, the senior vice president of operations. She cornered Nina in a stairwell one afternoon. "I do not know what game you are playing," Patricia hissed, her face inches from Nina's, "but you do not belong here. You are a nobody trying to climb her way up by destroying men who have actually built something. You are just like your father, a failure looking to blame others." Nina felt the words like physical blows. She wanted to defend herself, to explain, but Patricia was already walking away, her heels clicking sharply on the concrete stairs. That evening, Nina found Jackson waiting by her cleaning cart. His tie was loosened, his hair disheveled. He looked like he had aged years in just days. "We need to talk," he said. They went to his office, and Jackson closed the door. "The board is calling for an emergency meeting tomorrow. They want to discuss my fitness to lead the company. Patricia has been building support to remove me as CEO." Nina felt her heart sink. "This is my fault. I should never have said anything," Jackson said sharply. "You did the right thing. The only thing. But I need to be honest with you about what happens next. If I fight this, if I stand by my decision and by you, I might lose everything. The board has the power to vote me out. I could lose my company, my position, everything I have built." He paused, looking directly into her eyes. "Or I could tell them it was a mistake, that I overreacted. I could bring you into that meeting, have you apologize and admit you were wrong. I could sign a modified version of the merger agreement and make everyone happy. I could save my position and my company." Nina felt something break inside her chest. She understood what he was offering. A way out for both of them. A return to normal. But it would mean lying, betraying everything they had discovered, and watching him walk into a trap with his eyes open. She asked, her voice barely a whisper. The choice that defined everything. Jackson walked to the window, looking out at the city he had conquered. The office that had been his kingdom, the empire he had built from nothing. All of it could be gone tomorrow. Then he thought about his father, Janitor, who had taught him that integrity was worth more than gold. He thought about Nina's father, destroyed by a lie hidden in fine print. He thought about the man he wanted to be versus the man he was afraid of becoming. He turned back to Nina. "Tomorrow, I am going into that meeting, and I am going to tell them the truth. Every word of it. I am going to expose Bradley's scheme, show them the evidence, and explain exactly how you saved this company. And if they still vote to remove me, then so be it. I would rather lose my company than lose my soul." Nina's eyes filled with tears. "Jackson, you do not have to do this." "Yes, I do," he said, and for the first time in years, he felt truly free. "My whole life, I have made decisions based on what would make me successful. What would make me richer? What would give me more power? But success means nothing if it costs you everything that makes you human. You risked your job, your safety, your anonymity to help a stranger. The least I can do is risk my position to honor that courage." He crossed the room and took her hands in his. They were rough from years of cleaning floors, strong from hard work. They were the hands of someone who had sacrificed everything for the people she loved. "Besides," Jackson said with a small smile, "I have been thinking. This company needs someone who can actually read contracts and spot the traps everyone else misses. How would you feel about a new position? Director of Contract Review and Corporate Protection. 6-figure salary. Your own office. A team of analysts reporting to you." Nina stared at him in shock. "I do not have a law degree. I never finished. You have something better? You have experience, instinct, and a motivation that no degree can teach. You have seen what these schemes do to real people, and you will fight to prevent it. That is worth more than any credential." The meeting that changed lives the next morning, Jackson walked into the boardroom with Nina at his side. The 12 board members sat around the long table, their faces stern and disapproving. Patricia Jennings sat at the far end, a satisfied smile on her lips. "This is highly irregular," the board chairman, Robert Chen, said as he noticed Nina. "This meeting is for executives only." "Nina Torres is the reason we are having this meeting," Jackson replied calmly. "She deserves to be here for what I am about to say." For the next hour, Jackson presented everything. The hidden clause in the contract, the specialist lawyer's findings, Bradley's scheme to take over the company, the connection to the law firm that had destroyed Nina's father 15 years earlier. He held nothing back. When he finished, the room was silent. Patricia was the first to speak. "This is convenient timing, is it not? A custodian with a grudge against this particular law firm just happens to be working here when we negotiate with them? This sounds like conspiracy theory nonsense." "Then explain the clause," Jackson said coldly. "Explain how 12 lawyers missed what Nina spotted in seconds. Explain why Bradley has not returned a single phone call or email in 5 days. Explain why his personal assets were quietly transferred to offshore accounts last week." Robert Chen leaned forward. "We have confirmation of that? Our forensic accountants traced everything yesterday. Bradley has been planning this for at least 2 years. He specifically chose that law firm because of their expertise in hostile takeovers disguised as mergers. If I had signed that contract, he would have owned this company within 18 months, and all of us would have been powerless to stop it." The board members looked at each other, the reality sinking in. "So what you were telling us," Robert said slowly, "is that this young woman, working in night shifts cleaning floors, saved Reed Enterprises from a $3 billion theft." "That is exactly what I am telling you." Patricia shook her head in disbelief, but she had no response. Robert looked at Nina for a long moment, then at Jackson. "I move that we not only drop any discussion of removing Mr. Reed as CEO, but that we officially thank him for his judgment and Miss Torres for her intervention." "All in favor?" Every hand went up, even Patricia's, though slowly. "Motion carried," Robert said. He stood and extended his hand to Nina. "Miss Torres, on behalf of Reed Enterprises, thank you. You have our deepest gratitude." Nina shook his hand, still not quite believing what was happening. Around the table, other board members stood to thank her as well. Patricia left the room without a word, but Nina barely noticed. When the meeting ended, Jackson and Nina stood alone in the now empty boardroom. "I have a question," Nina said quietly. "Ask me anything." "Why did you really do this? Risk everything for someone you barely know?" Jackson smiled, and it was the first genuine smile Nina had seen from him. "Because for the first time in 20 years, I met someone who cared more about doing the right thing than about protecting themselves. You reminded me of who I used to be before I got lost in the pursuit of success, and I decided I wanted to be that person again." The transformation 3 months later, Nina Torres walked through the front doors of Reed Enterprises with her head held high. She wore a tailored gray suit, her hair styled professionally, a leather briefcase in her hand. The security guard smiled and nodded as she passed. "Good morning, Miss Torres. Good morning, Raymond," she replied warmly. The elevator carried her to the 20th floor, where the newly created Department of Contract Integrity had its offices. The glass doors bore her name and title in elegant silver letters. Inside, A team of 6 analysts were already at work, reviewing contracts for clients who had heard about Reed's new protective services and wanted the same scrutiny for their own deals. Nina's office overlooked Elliott Bay. It was smaller than Jackson's, but perfect. On her desk sat a framed photograph of her father, taken when she was a child. He was smiling, holding her hand, looking proud and happy. Before everything fell apart, "I did it, Dad," she whispered to the photograph. "I turned our tragedy into something that helps people. Something that would make you proud." A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Angela Reed, Jackson's younger sister and the company's head of operations, entered with a folder. "Morning, Nina. I have 3 new contracts that need your review. 2 from potential clients and 1 from our manufacturing division. They all seem straightforward, but after what happened with Bradley, no one signs anything without your approval anymore." Nina smiled. In the months since the attempted takeover, she had become one of the most valued members of the company. She had identified problems in 7 other contracts, saving Reed Enterprises and its clients millions of dollars. Her reputation was growing in the business community. Other companies were asking if they could hire her as a consultant. "I will have preliminary reports by this afternoon," Nina said, accepting the folder. Angela hesitated at the door. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "My brother is different now. Happier, more present. Everyone has noticed. Is that because of you?" Nina felt her cheeks warm. "I think that is a question you should ask him," Angela laughed. "He says the same thing about you. You 2 are perfect for each other, stubborn and noble in equal measure." She left before Nina could respond, but she was smiling. The foundation, that evening. Jackson knocked on Nina's office door just as she was packing up for the day. He had traded his usual formal suit for khakis and a sweater, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. "Do you have plans tonight?" he asked. "Just reviewing these contracts and maybe ordering takeout?" "I have a better idea. Come with me. There is something I want to show you." They drove through Seattle as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Jackson would not tell her where they were going, just smiled mysteriously when she asked. Finally, they pulled up to a community center in a neighborhood Nina recognized. It was where she had grown up, where her family had lived before everything fell apart. "Why are we here?" she asked. Jackson led her inside. The main room was filled with people, maybe 50 of them, sitting in chairs arranged in a semicircle. Nina recognized some faces. Small business owners, struggling entrepreneurs, people who looked tired and worried, carrying the weight of trying to survive in a world that often crushed the small and vulnerable. At the front of the room stood a banner, the Torres Foundation for Business Protection and Education. Nina stopped walking, her hand flying to her mouth. "Jackson, what is this?" "This is what we talked about, what you dreamed of. A place where small business owners can come for free legal advice, contract review, and protection against the schemes that destroyed your father. I provided the funding, but this is your vision. Nina, your father's legacy." Tears streamed down Nina's face as she looked at the banner. At the people waiting, at the dream made real, a woman in the front row stood up. She was in her 50s, with tired eyes and calloused hands. "Are you Nina Torres?" Nina nodded, unable to speak. "My name is Rachel Kimura. I own a small bakery. Last month, someone approached me with an investment offer. The contract looked good, but something felt wrong. I heard about you, about what you did at Reed Enterprises. I brought the contract here hoping someone could help." Rachel's voice broke. "Your people found the trap. They showed me how I would have lost my bakery, the business my parents started 40 years ago. You saved my life. You saved my family." Nina crossed the room and embraced Rachel, both women crying. Around them, others stood and applauded. These were the people Nina had dreamed of helping, the ones who could not afford expensive lawyers, who were vulnerable to predators hiding behind legal language, who just needed someone to care enough to protect them. The confrontation was shadows. Not everyone was happy about the foundation's success. 2 weeks after the opening, Nina received a visitor at her office. Christopher Wells was a man in his 60s, expensively dressed, with cold eyes and a cruel smile. Nina recognized him immediately from the research she had done years ago. He was the senior partner at the law firm that had crafted the contract that destroyed her father. "Miss Torres," he said, settling into the chair across from her desk without being invited. "I thought it was time we met." "I know who you are," Nina said coldly. "I am sure you do. Just as I have known about you for quite some time. Did you really think you could hide working as a custodian? I have been watching you since you dropped out of law school. I knew you would resurface eventually." Nina felt ice in her veins. "What do you want?" "I want you to close your little foundation. Stop interfering with business. These contracts you keep sabotaging represent billions of dollars in deals. You are costing very powerful people a great deal of money." "Good," Nina said firmly. "Those deals are designed to rob people of everything they have worked for. I am going to keep stopping them." Christopher leaned forward. "Then let me be clear about what will happen. I will destroy you the way I destroyed your father. I will bring ethics charges. I will claim you are practicing law without a license. I will tie you up in litigation until you are bankrupt. And when I am done, Jackson Reed will suffer too. I will go after his company, his reputation, his family. Everyone you care about will pay the price for your stubbornness." Before Nina could respond, her office door opened. Jackson walked in, followed by Angela and Robert Chen, the board chairman. Behind them came two people Nina did not recognize, a man and woman in conservative suits carrying briefcases. "Mr. Wells," Jackson said pleasantly. "Thank you for making this so easy. We were not sure you would come personally." Christopher's face went pale. "What is this?" The woman in the suit stepped forward. "Christopher Wells. I am Special Agent Jennifer Park with the FBI. We have been investigating you and your firm for securities fraud, conspiracy to commit theft, and racketeering for the past 2 years. Your threat just now to Ms. Torres, which was recorded, gives us everything we need for additional charges of intimidation and attempted extortion." The male agent moved to Christopher's side. "You have the right to remain silent." As they read him his rights and led him from the office in handcuffs, Christopher looked back at Nina with pure hatred. But Nina felt no satisfaction, only relief. The man who had destroyed her father would finally face justice. After the agents left, Nina collapsed into her chair, shaking. Jackson knelt beside her, taking her hands.
"How did you know he would come?"
she asked. "Because men like him cannot stand to lose. Once your foundation started helping people, started exposing their schemes, I knew he would try to stop you directly." "We have been ready for weeks," Angela added. "The FBI contacted us a month ago. They had been building a case but needed someone on the inside to help them. When we told them about you, about what you had discovered, they realized you were the key to everything." The healing that night, Jackson and Nina sat on the rooftop terrace of Reed Enterprises, the same place where Nina had once stood as a custodian, invisible and alone. Now she sat beside the man who had changed her life, who had believed in her when no one else did. "I need to tell you something," Jackson said quietly. "These past few months, working with you, building the foundation, watching you help people, I have fallen in love with you, Nina, completely and impossibly in love." Nina turned to him, her heart racing. "Jackson, I am not from your world. I am not polished or educated or—" He stopped her with a gentle finger on her lips. "You are the bravest, smartest, most compassionate person I have ever met. You saved my company, saved me from becoming someone I would have hated, and showed me what really matters in life. Where you come from does not matter. Who you are is everything." "I love you too," Nina whispered. "I think I have since that first night when you actually listened to me. When you saw me as a person instead of just a cleaner." They kissed as the city lights sparkled around them. Two people from different worlds who had found each other in the most unexpected way. 6 months later, the Torres Foundation had expanded to 3 locations across Washington state. Nina had hired a team of 20 people, including several lawyers who had grown tired of corporate greed and wanted to help protect the vulnerable instead of exploiting them. Rachel Kimura's bakery was thriving. She had opened a second location and hired Nina's younger brother, Daniel, who had returned to school to finish his business degree. Patricia Jennings had quietly resigned from Reed Enterprises. After the board discovered she had been receiving payments from Bradley Hoffman for years, Bradley himself was arrested in the Cayman Islands and extradited to face fraud charges. His trial was ongoing. The evidence was overwhelming. Christopher Wells had pleaded guilty to 14 counts of fraud and racketeering. He was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. His law firm had been dissolved, its assets seized to compensate victims. As for Nina's father, his name had been cleared. The California bar issued a posthumous statement acknowledging that David Torres had been a victim of a sophisticated fraud, not a negligent attorney. Nina had the letter framed and hung it in the foundation's main lobby. Beneath his photograph, the wedding 1 year to the day after Nina had whispered those 3 words that changed everything. She and Jackson stood before their friends and family in a small ceremony overlooking Puget Sound. Nina wore a simple white dress. Jackson wore his best suit. Angela served as maid of honor. Daniel walked Nina down the aisle. The guest list was small, but meaningful. Reed Enterprises executives sat beside former custodians who had worked with Nina, FBI agents who had taken down. Christopher Wells celebrated with small business owners the foundation had helped. Rachel Kimura had baked the wedding cake as Jackson and Nina exchanged vows, promising to stand by each other through whatever came next. Nina thought about her father. She hoped he could see this somehow, could know that his death had not been meaningless, that from the ashes of his tragedy, something beautiful had grown. A foundation that protected people. A love that crossed all boundaries. A legacy that would help thousands. "I love you," Jackson whispered, as they were pronounced husband and wife. "I love you too," Nina replied. "Thank you for listening to a custodian." Jackson laughed and kissed her deeply. "Thank you for having the courage to speak when everyone else would have stayed silent." The new chapter, 5 years passed. The Torres Foundation had expanded across the country, with offices in 12 states. Nina had written a book about contract fraud that became required reading in law schools. She spoke at conferences and universities, teaching people how to protect themselves from predatory business practices. Jackson had restructured Reed Enterprises to focus not just on profit, but on ethical business practices. The company had become a model for conscious capitalism, proving that success and integrity were not mutually exclusive. Together, they had started a scholarship fund for children of business owners who had been victims of fraud. Daniel had graduated and now ran the foundation's West Coast operations. Nina's mother had moved back to Seattle and volunteered at the foundation. It's 3 days a week. On the anniversary of that first meeting, Jackson and Nina returned to his office. It looked different now. Less imposing, more welcoming. The massive desk had been replaced with a simple table. The walls held photographs of foundation clients whose lives had been changed. "Do you ever regret it?" Nina asked. "Giving up the chance to be ruthless, to maximize profit without caring about the cost." Jackson pulled her close. "Not for a single second. I was dying inside, Nina. I had everything and nothing at the same time. You saved my life in every way a person can be saved." Nina smiled and kissed him. "We saved each other." They stood at the window looking out at the city they both loved, at the foundation building visible in the distance, at the life they had built from a whispered warning and an act of courage. Sometimes the smallest voice speaks the loudest truth. Sometimes the person cleaning your floors sees more clearly than everyone at the table. Sometimes love comes from the most unexpected places and changes everything. Nina Torres had walked into that office as a custodian, invisible and forgotten. She left as a hero, a wife, and a force for justice. And it all started with 3 simple words: do not sign.